CEO Wisdom Pod with my man, Christopher Boulas. He is CEO at Formulytic. Really had that nice flow with Chris so far. Lots of discussions, lots of wisdom already drops. I wish we would have started the recording before, but Chris, can you introduce yourself? Tell us a bit more about yourself and Formulytic.
Yeah, well, Charles, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. I'm obviously following a lineage here of some pretty remarkable guests, so I'm fortunate to be here this afternoon, kind of sharing some of my experience with your community as well. So as Charles expertly teed up, I'm Chris Boulas, founder and CEO of Formulytic, based here out of Southern California on the West Coast. And I have been running Formulytic, my company, for the past 7, going on 8 years in October of this year. And so Formulytic is a B2B SaaS exclusive demand gen and revenue operations consulting firm. Funny enough, it sounds like a mouthful every time I say it, Charles. But we really partner with really fast-growing B2B SaaS orgs on everything from go-to-market strategy, marketing and sales, technology infrastructure, to really facilitate and propel them into their next stage of growth and ultimately some point, to exit.
There you go. Love the energy. So you started well, you didn't exactly start it, but you worked at one of my favorite companies, SendGrid, and you actually met your wife there.
That's right. That's right. And it's funny also because if I didn't have my SendGrid experience, Formulytic would have never existed. And this is a really important message, I think, for younger folks as well, especially coming out of high school or college, and they don't want to follow a traditional career path into working as a full-time employee for a company. Right? A lot of folks more and more now want to jump right into a startup or jump right into starting their own company. And what's awesome is that the barrier to entry for many of these business ideas has never been lower. But on the flip side, a lot of these really hungry young people don't have the business acumen or the experience to really give themselves, their best shot on goal. And so I, have followed a very traditional career path, working for Fortune 100 companies as well as startups. And I felt like I was ready to start Formulytic much earlier than I actually was. And I can even, dovetail into a good story about that. But, long-winded way of saying, Charles, had it not been for my, past startup experience, whether that's SendGrid or Kapost, I wouldn't have had the business knowledge, to really give Formulytic a successful shot.
Right. It's always interesting to ask yourself the question. So, well, first, I delve right in. I had like these student jobs, but I became an entrepreneur straight up at 20. So I never really had a serious job. I also co-founded a marketing agency with my first mentor. And that was my first real job in sales. But sometimes I reflect on things, and in another life, I think if I would have to start again, I'd either be an athlete, so like a UFC fighter or a Navy SEAL or something, which is weird, right? Like when you say that out loud, but I would start with discipline, or I would start with the path that you mentioned. I would search for my ideal mentor. I don't know, back in these days, I was Tim Ferriss or someone like that. And I would ask to work for them, or Ryan Holiday, for example. And I would just like follow their footsteps, and I would indulge in the wisdom. And I do think that would give me an unfair advantage. And if you check at the mentees of these guys, they all have like amazing careers right now. Charlie Owen, for example, there's this guy, I forgot his name, but he's producing just amazing content that's always front page on LinkedIn and Twitter. And I do think you get an unfair advantage just from indulging in these people's world and absorbing their essence.
And it's funny that you mentioned Navy SEAL as an option there, because I just finished reading Jocko Willink's Extreme Ownership earlier this year.
Classic.
And we've actually, since instated his ethos as one of our company values, right? Everything is your fault, right? To the extreme extent. Now, understanding that there's circumstances outside of your control, but even in those scenarios, you could have taken ownership, right, at least communicating in advance what those things could be, right? There's always something that you can take responsibility for. And as you know, that when you're ultimately looking at the intangible benefits of that, from bolstering your credibility and showing humility, those are all really strong relationship building characteristics.
Right. So, I mean, one of my favorite book right there, but every time I tried to apply in my company, it always failed. I don't know if that tells a lot about my poor hiring skills. But I look forward to injecting that philosophies in my GPTs. Let's call it that way. They will listen. They will understand. How do you hire like top folks that will understand and live by that ethos?
That's a great question, Charles. The answer is very slowly. That is a very.
That's my problem.
Yes. No one wants to hear that answer, but Formulytic has grown, up until 2022 at a rate of about one full-time hire per year. Right. It has been a long, arduous road to find key hires. But on the flip side of that, outside of those folks that we've hired more recently, everyone on my team that I hired as early as 2017 is still on the team today. Wow. Right. I think that says a lot about our hiring practices and the, tight-knit culture that we've ultimately built. And we try and even impart that into our client relationships as well, where we really put the relationship at the forefront of everything that we're doing. And what's funny, and you might be able to attest to this too through your top leads work, Charles, is that we say that the work that we do, the output, that's the service, but the product is the people. Right. And so metaphorically, when you move to a new apartment or a new house, what do? You pack all your stuff up and you take it with you. And that's how we've grown, right? CMOs, VPs of marketing will, mature in their career or move onto a new opportunity. And because we have the relationship as our backbone, that has allowed us to expand our professional network, our community, and therefore our client relationships as well.
That's the right way to go. I'm somewhat, I've tried agencies for the last 7 years, had my success, had my failures. Talking about backing up, I think I'm backing up the human model and even the agency model, and we'll try to saasify pretty soon. But that's me, that's my fallible or imperfect human skills. A lot of people listening to that pod, I'm quite public about my failures, and most people must be like, Charles kind of sucks at hiring and so forth, or people that know me well, but I've had my victories too. It's not like all cloudy. I want to ask you though, like what services do you provide for what price, what type of clients at your company?
Yeah. So we work exclusively, like I said, with B2B SaaS organizations. And as we look back at I'm going to ballpark it, 50 companies that we've worked with over the last 7-8 years, roughly half of them are IT, cybersecurity, DevOps, engineering, based audiences. We have since, augmented that in more recent times with fintech, financial services, healthcare technology more recently, but really the backbone coming off the back of my personal experience at SendGrid being a very strongly, development oriented, firm, has really allowed my professional network to remain concentrated with those types of organizations and in roles. And so that's sort of the breakdown. When we look at the hybrid offering of demand generation, or what is now known today as demand generation, and then this emerging field of revenue operations, I look back and, back in 2015, I think I was onto something much bigger at the time than I really thought that I was, because here I am working as a full-time employee at a startup company, and, thinking that I can package up the combined offering into one service and then take that to other Series A, Series B companies. And I don't think I realized at the time how big of an opportunity that was. We had really great traction, really strong reception based off my professional network, in the startup community. But I look at how it has evolved now, and I say, wow, there's just so much more crossover now with data accessibility and go-to-market tools in how, marketing operational marketing operations leaders are, really most advantageous when they have the skill set to understand both schools. And that's something that we've over these, last 7 years have been really effective at, tailoring on behalf of clients.
Right. And I think you've done it quite well. You've scaled slowly but surely, and you decided to invest some of that capital into companies and into properties, I believe. Tell us about that model.
Yeah. So outside of formulytic, which today comprises of about 90% of my day, I'm also interested really heavily in real estate. I like supporting, other B2B SaaS organizations that I have a personal interest in, which I started making, angel investments into as recent as just last year. And on the real estate side, I have recognized that formulytic as a business model, and you can attest to this from your agency experience, Charles, it is very non-scalable, right? And I think that as much as I have wanted it to be, I've come to terms with it. And now I'm at the point where I'm embracing that non-scalable aspect. But at the same time, because that is more of a hours for dollars business model, I've really wanted to augment my business interests with something that was counter to that. And just based on my interest in real estate, I've found that that's a really good just a really good and different model that I've really taken a keen interest in. And so right now, we are investing predominantly in small multifamily properties, specifically in Texas, Dallas-Fort Worth in particular. And that's been great because it's much more hands-off, but still provides the business opportunities by way of the acquisition, the asset management, looking at deals. There's just a lot that you can still be hands-on with that doesn't require the same level of day-to-day effort as something like running formulytic does.
Right. And I've listened to Sam Part, the founder of the My First Million podcast, which is one of my favorite pods, and he keeps mentioning that real estate's a pain. I believe he's in the Airbnb segment of things, so maybe that's more hands-on. Is that right to say that what you're onto is less hands-on and less pain, less fixing the toilet and the plumbing than managing like an Airbnb? Is that the mental model here?
Yeah, that's right. Now, the benefit of Airbnb, VRBO, kind of what we brand as short-term rental, means of kind of managing properties, that will provide you with generally a higher cash-on-cash return, better return on your investment, right? Because you're able to charge more for those shorter intervals. But what we focus on is the long-term rental aspect, right? So these are your traditional annual leases, long-term stabilized tenants, good incomes, really looking for a place to call home. That's really where we focus. Now, that carries with it still a certain degree of property management, but as an out-of-state investor, I've spent, really the last 6 months in particular, trying to get systems in place that will give me the confidence in managing from California, knowing that things are going to be taken care of with minimal oversight. And so that's not to say that an air conditioning unit's not going to go out on you, because it actually has already. But as long as you have, the team in place locally that you can trust to kind of help be your eyes and ears, that's going to carry you quite far.
What about trying to scale the agency model? Are you thinking to either super productize it, saasify it, or injecting AI in there so that it can actually scale?
Yeah, so I would say a combination of the above, but really I would place stronger emphasis on the SaaS-based model. The idea is to keep the core of the client services, model that's already kind of our tried and true intact, but then augment with SaaS-based offerings. And what's interesting, and it's funny that you bring it up, Charles, because I already have a short list of ideas that I want to develop, new tools and capabilities against. For example, the marketing attribution space right now is really ripe for the picking. A lot of folks in the MarTech space will be familiar with Visible, who was a standalone platform in the attribution space. It was Salesforce native for kind of the SMB and mid-market. And Adobe has since acquired them and now packages that up as a counter offering to kind of Marketo, or a companion offering to Marketo. Well, now when you look at the multi-touch reporting space, there's very few alternatives left at a price point that the SMB and mid-market can benefit from. And so that's kind of a really core idea that I've been thinking more heavily about recently. But if I take a step back for a moment on the scalability of the client services model, I'm going on 8 years in October, on this business. And, you really experienced the highs and the lows during that time. The highs are phenomenal. The lows are hell, right? And I will be coming up on my 40th birthday here in a couple years. And I'm looking at this 10-year milestone and really starting to put a lot more thought against what I think the future of the company is. And I don't know, and this is a conversation I have with my team, even, just transparently, I don't know that I'm always going to be the front man, right? Or what I'll call the managing director of the company. I feel like at some point the baton might get passed, and then I may choose to go deeper on the real estate side. I may choose to go all in on this SaaS-based model and take a minority stake in the client services portion of the business. There's a lot of avenues right now, but 8 years later is a period of time where I didn't think I would ever be doing something this long, right? When you think about the average tenure at a startup as a full-time employee, you'd be, lucky if it's 2 years today. Now that's anecdotal. I don't have any data to support that, but, turnover tends to be high, right? Especially as you grow in your career faster while you're young. And, I would say that I did not expect formulytic to do as well as it has for as long as it has. And so not that I want to push my luck necessarily, but I am looking at what I feel like the next big thing for me is, right, from a professional development perspective, and really where my business interests are either starting to expand more or align closer against.
And to potentially answer that question, what trends are you seeing in the market, whether that's the product, whether that is the market, and what trends are you precisely seeing in your field? So like with sales, for example, RevOps and formulytic, what are you seeing that is trending right now?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. You just poked the bear on this one, Charles, because there's just so many things, right? And so it's hard to obviously predict the future. Past performance is not indicative of future returns, as we all know. But I think a couple of things that would point to here, just anecdotally, is that first and foremost, there is a strong emphasis right now for B2B SaaS organizations to take greater advantage of account-based marketing programs. Now, I think a lot of us in marketing or sales will be familiar with the acronym ABM, or account-based marketing. But what we're seeing is that if I can go a level deeper on this, is greater intersection of the sales outbound component with marketing account-based programs. And this is what we're calling on our team revenue team orchestration, which is really this all hands on deck go-to-market model, where it does not follow the antiquated go-to-market path where marketing is responsible for everything. This looks much more holistically at building programs that intentionally take advantage of not only marketing's knowledge and expertise, but also sales, success, and the finance organization as well. And that is a really good way to build cross-team alignment internally, where we go into your average B2B SaaS organization today, and that does not exist, or it exists very loosely. So it's a way to force the team alignment through a mutually incentivized goal, right? Which is, we all care about pipeline. We all care about, net new revenue, right? MRR, ARR, however you want to measure that. And this becomes a way to really strategically at the onset, even during the planning, part of the exercise, really get everybody on board. So everyone's input is considered. That is directionally starting to happen within our client relationships much more frequently now than they even were 6 to 12 months ago. That's kind of one big one.
One big fat one, which we can develop on a round two. But for now, Chris, where can people find out more about you?
Yeah. So formulytic.com, Chris at formulytic.com. I'm also Chris Boulas on LinkedIn. I try and publish content daily, either in long form or video based format. This is a big content production year for us. Charles already knows this, but we've built a 7-figure annual business for 6 years without producing a single piece of content, and we're just now starting to be a lot more active, from a public-facing perspective. So folks can feel free to follow me and interact with me there. And then, last but not least, Formulytic is FORMULY.